Earlier today, you could have heard my colleagues, Sylvie Gyurko and child rights ambassadors, to speak about the importance of receiving information. And yes, if children do not understand what is going on or what to expect, what should and should not be done to them, it will be very difficult to feel safe or develop trust, open up and raise their questions. And helping children understand their rights is our common responsibility. But how can we make these legal provisions tangible and relevant for children? Based on the materials that we developed with and for children, also as part of the CHILS project and beyond that, I would like to share our experiences and the biggest challenges that we faced, and give you maybe some useful tips on how to benefit from using these child-friendly tools the most. So the next slide, please. We will address the following questions. So what makes information child-friendly, how to use and develop child-friendly materials, and how you can involve children in this process. Thank you. The next one, please. Okay, so what makes information child-friendly? Changing the font size, adding cute illustrations, starting from the birds and bees. That might be reasonable, but never satisfactory. Child-friendly information means that information is adapted to a child's age, maturity, language, gender and culture, knowledge and capacities. Once you take this seriously, it affects the language, the vocabulary, the tone you use, and whether it is available in the mother tongue of the child. It affects the content and its relevance for children, the design, which should also fit for children, the layout, the structure, etc. It affects the channels, what you use, whether it is accessible, whether it is online, offline, searchable, address children directly or indirectly. And it affects the context in terms of the time which is available to give and process information, to form the questions of children and ask it, and also the atmosphere, both in terms of physical atmosphere and spiritual atmosphere, in which children learn about something, and whether they can feel relaxed and comfortable in that environment. So besides the golden rule of do no harm should be underlined, which means whether you notice if a child appears distressed or overwhelmed, how you react on that, whether you take a break or you stop, or if you realize that you need extra support, or you maybe or you might want to consult any other specialist. So in sum, child-friendly information means that the information and the information giver are specific and sensitive. It tells about the aim of developing a good understanding, and also the process, how you get there. I guess this is not the first time that you are told to use, for example, a child-friendly language. The problem is that this is not so simple, and sometimes we don't know how to do that. So I collected some challenges on the next slide. Firstly, how can you be child-specific if you address a wider group of children or produce a general awareness-raising material? So how can one tool fit for a 14-year-old and a 17-year-old child, or a boy from Egypt and a girl from Pakistan? So leaflets inevitably generalizes to a certain extent, especially the ones that present international regulations. They prescribe general principles, give guidance, but leave the specificities to national regulations. However, many times children are interested in those details that are beyond the scope of universal children's rights or EU directives. So one needs to mitigate the dilemma of staying too general or giving just a handful of information, but what is more specific. But one also needs to consider that international regulations might differ from country to country, depending on their membership status or derogations, which is also a challenge. Therefore, one should be very careful with the reduction of information or with the wording, and the ambition to keep the text simple is very hard, and it can lead to hard compromises. Writing at a simple level, it sacrifices the complexities of the content, and I'm sure that everyone who ever developed a child-friendly material faced that. But by the way, balancing the general and the specific information can address the concern of being too idealistic when one talks about the overarching principles or basic rights, such as that every child should be treated fairly or have right to protection. I mean, too often the gap between the actual experiences of children and universal children's rights are too wide, not to mention that some of these rights are soft rights, and for example, while the EU directives are definitive and hard law, the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child is not. Okay, so next, who is capable? No, sorry, I'm not finished. So who is able and capable and competent in sharing information about child rights? So lawyers who know the legislation, interpreters who are in a position of trust, or psychologists who are trained to handle sensitive situations. And the sense of incompetence is a very common problem that prevents many adults and professionals from giving information. And many times beautiful tools are produced, but it is very hard, if not impossible, to find them. Because they are uploaded in a downloadable, like PDF format, and Google cannot see them, or because there was no budget for communication or for the distribution of materials, or for the maintenance of a website or a game, for example. So sustainability and funding should be a primary consideration. And lastly, even if we try our best to stay young, we are not children, which is a problem. Do you know that communication exercise, when you work in pairs and you try to reproduce a drawing based on your partner's verbal instructions? So in this task, the partners put the back of the chairs against each other, and the partner who tries to recreate the picture cannot see the original one. And even if your instructions are accurate and and very, very good, you have to take account of the other's perspective, the other's vocabulary, the other's mindset and associations. So, you have to take into account the other's perspective, and our mindset are very different. The reference points are missing. So this is what happens when you try to address children simply because you are an adult. you don't know everything. Okay, now the next slide, please. Okay, so I know that was a long list. That was a long list of challenges, but how can we inform children? And let's go on to the first advice, to the next slide. First of all, thank you. So first of all, we should focus on what is relevant for children, because children don't need to understand the whole legal context or know maybe the exact order of the paragraphs, or maybe some details for them would be just confusing. So take the perspective of children and restrict yourself to the information that are truly necessary and interesting for your target group. And here in this slide, you can see the child-friendly version of the Lanzarote Convention, which was developed for Council of Europe by Hintalovon Foundation in collaboration with children. And as you might be well aware of that, this is the Council of Europe Convention on the protection of children against sexual exploitation and sexual abuse. And this publication, this child-friendly publication, focuses on children's questions. It uses a case-based approach, and it presents 8 conversations, 8 scenarios that bring together the frequently asked questions of children. And here the child characters seek information or just share their concerns about issues that many children know or are familiar with. And so the big thing is that they break the silence and turn to people like the teacher, the psychologist, peer supporter, helpline, or chat, help chat. And these dialogues show that sexuality and sexual abuse and exploitation can be discussed. And it reflects for children that the people can react very differently. And these stories might evoke various feelings, and all of them are okay. So while we took this case-based approach in this form of a conversation, let us put children's questions first, and made the whole convention more lifelike. It promoted that. It promoted also children's agency to learn more, and encouraged them to seek help. It is available now on the Lanzarote website, on the Council of Europe website, and at this moment maybe more than 10 languages. So you might have already known that as well. Okay, thank you. The next one. So how can we inform children? Knowing your audience is of course a basic requirement in all communication materials, because once you address children, you should bear in mind that who exactly is your audience, and what are they like, what do they like, and how do they collect information. And based on our recent representative research in Hungary, websites are the primary tools for children to receive information about abuse and many other issues. So making child-friendly information accessible is very fundamental. And no matter how well you wrote and designed your publication, if children are unable to find it, it is simply not user-friendly. So think about popular fact sites or chat forums. Sometimes they are everything but beautiful, but these are the ones that children find, and that's why they use it. So we need to produce better, safer quality alternatives. And the picture on the left is a website that was developed, or it is run by Hintalovon Foundation. It is called Yelon, which is a website for teenagers. And this is about sexuality, relationships, and child rights. Children can find out about issues that affect them, and also use anonymous chat that is operated by trained volunteers. And the professional team in Yelon is working closely with the communication and internet online marketing specialists. So because they know how search engines and computer programmed algorithms work, what children search for, or how, or they can look into the actual search terms or keywords that children type in to Google or other search engines. So we have to collaborate. We need others. We need communication experts to make all these materials accessible. Another approach that might come in from this sense is that we have to use the words that children know and that children use. You might ask, then no lawyer talk? Yes, no lawyer talk, please. But what about all the technical terms? Well, does it mean that we have to avoid using all of them? I would say we have to be very conscious about why we are using them, because if we can imagine a situation when a child hears some technical terms during legal proceedings, and it is very important that they can find these words as well. So you have to use all these words in parallel, or we try to do that in the Yelon site and in our awareness raising activity. Okay, and the picture on the right, this is a banner that we use to raise awareness of an online consultation that enabled children in Hungary to take part in CRC reporting, so to take part in the reporting to the UN. These sentences were used in an Instagram campaign. It is in Hungarian, but it says that, okay, for example, can you go to pee during the class, or did you have to write a test as a punishment in school? So why we did that, or what was that? It was simply because they are much more relatable for children than words like child rights. Like, obviously they don't like the word child, and they don't know their rights, and the UN and all these legal terminology is so alienating. So we try to create eye-catching ads and teaser videos with a more specific language. So what I want to highlight here is that communication and the professional content, for example, in the leaflet, might differ or might be different in general awareness raising materials. Thank you. The next one, please. Okay. The next slide, please. Okay. Thanks. Yes, use diverse approaches. You could have seen the video developed in the Cominer project, which is here in the corner, and as part of the CHILLS project, various child-friendly leaflets were developed, including these information sheets, mapping, flowcharts, and the storytelling. They aim to assist adults in providing comprehensive and easy to understand information to children, and they collect the most important information about criminal proceedings, asylum proceedings, and interpreter-mediator communication. These topics drove from the needs that were identified in previous researches and in the steering committee meeting in Antwerp in May. These are just some examples for that. We involved children in the review of the drafts, which were really, really useful. For example, children highlighted that that picking up the story of one child in a storytelling, it gives them impression that it usually happens the way it is presented in a material. So exemplifying always holds a risk for setting a standard. So does it happen always like this? Does it necessarily lead to this and that? So it would create expectation, and you have to consider that when you draft, for example, a storytelling. Also regarding storytelling, children reflected. So we received some feedback that some of the storylines were incomplete, unclear, or maybe distracted their attention, raised new questions. So we have to keep in mind that children might be interested in different parts of the happenings, which are maybe not so relevant or concerning for us as adults. For example, if a new character is introduced, his or her storyline also needs a closure, or children might be more interested in what happens to the main character's sibling, which was just mentioned in one slide or two, in one page or two, than the actual adult character, which is in the center of the story. So children's feedback really called our attention to the need to adopt a holistic approach, and it became very clear that information sheets and storytelling techniques and flowcharts and mapping and videos, they are very good tools, but they do not replace one another, but they complement each other. So shortlisting the most important information and putting it so shortlisting the most important information in a leaflet and putting it in a context by building a storyline are very important, are both equally important, but they serve different goals. But used together, if you use it together, it can help you and help children develop a better understanding. Thank you. The next one, please. Okay, so although some of these child-friendly materials might work on their own, their biggest merit is that they support a discussion between a child and an adult. So many times we cannot access children directly, maybe due to their age or due to their vulnerability. But it's important that you know that child-friendly materials benefit not just children, but you too. You who are there, who are beside a child, and you have a very important role in making them understand what is going on. So think about these child-friendly materials as a reminder what kind of information you should share with them. They basically give you the terminology, the words, they bring up issues, they bring up topics, and they serve as a tools. That's why they are called a tool. They are tools to initiate a conversation, and so you should discuss it together. So how can you do that the better? It's if it's possible, you should read the materials first on your own, and of course bear in mind whether it's content and language fit for the particular child. You can adopt its language to the child's age and maturity, and you can check the national regulations and whether it applies something in your country or not. So you can basically mitigate the limitations and mitigate the risks and compensate for all these limitations of a child-friendly material. But you have to read them together to do that. You can also help them link the presented information to their particular situation and ask them what they expect, how they imagine a certain situation, who they met so far. So use these child-friendly materials in your discussions and use it really as a tools. The third point is here is that we should always keep in mind that even if these materials are developed for children, certain topics might stir up children's emotions. So we should prepare for any possible questions, maybe consult specialists. So the point here is that be aware what you use and why. Basically, your aim is to initiate a discussion. So don't be afraid of any questions. Just be prepared. Okay, and the next one, please. And I can see the time is running, yeah. So we have to prepare very carefully, and we have to be very mindful of what is realistic with a certain material within our budget, of course. So we should position it, we should target it very carefully, define and indicate the age group, because as we were discussing in this conference, so childhood is really not united, or it is very different. It can take many forms. So you have to target your material very wisely. Okay, I would like to raise attention for sustainability, because on one hand, we should be economical and environment friendly, and consider the printer capacities of police stations or migration centers. So if you develop something if you develop printed materials, please consider that as well, and consider also the adoption and translation issues, because many times it is really hard to track back to the original designer and find the editable version of videos. If you want to add the dubbing, for example, or subtitles, how you will do that. So if you prepare an international document, an international material, you have to keep all these in mind. I'm sure that in this conference you heard a lot about the importance of teamwork. We were talking about this a lot, but so maybe I just jump here, but it is really important. And let's go on to the next one, which is a very important one. The next slide. Is the involvement of children, which is really important because children are experts in their own life. Maybe, okay, I think you cannot see the slide yet. Can we go on to the next slide? Thank you. Okay, thank you. So why should we involve children in our work? well, as I said, we are not children. So, but children are experts in their own lives, and they are capable of and competent in issues affecting them. They are capable of expressing their views, and given the right questions and given the right support and environment, they are really valuable partners in making a change and in giving very good feedbacks and giving very good insights in what they need to know and how they want to know that. But I gave you earlier, I gave you some examples how what kind of feedback children can give. But what is important here is that the real value of child participation lies in the process itself, because we experienced when we tested the materials with the CHILS material, so these child-friendly materials, the compass, it really, our discussions with children, it really modeled the introduction of these materials to children, similarly as it might be presented later by the legal professionals. So you have to think about, okay, how will I present this material to a child? What will I say? How should I put this in context? So it is really helpful, and I really encourage you to involve children in this work. Okay, so who do you involve? The question always comes in that whether gender balance and age balance and all these questions, but in the reality, most often the accessibility what matters. And I based on our experiences, the motivation and the genuine participation of children is much more important than any external, ideas or goals that to balance out all these matters. Yes, it is important, but if children are motivated and they feel trusted and respected, then it is much more beneficial. The question is that who, by whom? So we tested the choice materials in Hungary because we have a constant relationship with children and they are our colleagues in Hintalovon Foundation. But sometimes it was really hard because the authors of, some of the authors of the child-friendly materials couldn't be present because it was developed by the project partners. So, and this happens many times that maybe you are working with children and you are asked, okay, can you please test this or that with your group of children? This is really not that easy. It is much better if you involve children from the beginning, and if those people involve children who is actually working on that particular material. So and if you now, if you might have questions about your competencies of working with children, then again, teamwork and multidisciplinary teamwork is I think the key for that. Okay, and so how do we involve children? That could be a very different and another presentation. One thing is sure, that it requires time and capacity and budget and funding. So because it requires time, but I can tell you that it's worth it. And if you plan ahead and if you spend enough capacity, how you can do it best, then they will give you really good input in your work. And lastly, just to wrap this up in the last slide, teamwork, cooperation with children, the relevance, and focusing on the relevant children is really important. And please use all these materials that you can find for your own purposes. Try adapt it to your own goals, according to your own goals. And don't forget to share your experiences. Many times we miss all those descriptions, how you worked with children. That's why we produced a long description, and you will find it uploaded, how we worked with children. Let's make this transparent, and this is very important. And the last thing that I want to add, and this is where I close my presentation, is that do it as you can. So if you want to inform children, is the one thing that you cannot do is that you do nothing. Because you might feel that you are incompetent in some questions, but if you put yourself in the child position, you understand perfectly that the children's problems are complex and they should be addressed with a holistic view, and this is not determined by professions. And your insight, whether you are an interpreter, a lawyer, or a psychologist, a social worker, is as needed as others. So thank you so much.